Russian researchers in the late 1940s kept 5 people awake for 15 days using experimental gas-based stimulant. They were kept in sealed environment to carefully monitor their oxygen intake so that the gas didn't kill them. Since it was toxic in high concentrations, this was before closed circuit cameras, so they could only have microphones and a 5-inch thick glass porthole size of windows to the chamber to monitor them. The chamber was stocked with books, cots to keep sleep on, but no bedding, running water and toilet, and enough dried food to last for at least all 5 for over a month. The test subjects were political prisoners deemed enemies of the state of returning or during World War II. Everything was fine for the first 5 days. The subjects hardly complained about having been promised falsely that they would be freed if they submitted to the last test and did not sleep for 30 days. Their conversations and activities were monitored and they were noted so that they continued to talk about increasingly traumatic incidents in their past. And the general tone of their conversations took a darker aspect after the 4-day mark. After 5 days, they started to complain about the circumstances and events that led them to where they are and started to demonstrate severe paranoia. They stopped talking to each other and began alternatively whispering to the microphones and one-way mirrored portholes. Oddly, they all seemed to think that they could win the trust of the experiment by turning over their comrades, the observer subjects in captivity, with them. At the first time, the researchers suspected that this was an effect of the gas itself. After 9 days of them, they started screaming. He ran the length of the chamber repeatedly, yelling at the top of his lungs for 3 hours straight. He continued attempting to scream, but was only able to produce occasional squeaks. The researchers postulated that he had physically torn his vocal cords. The most surprising thing about his behavior is that how the other captives reacted to it, or rather, didn't react to it. They continued whispering into the microphones until the second of the captives started to scream. The 2 non-stop screaming captives took the books apart, smeared the page after page with their own feces, and plastered them calmly over the glass portholes. The screaming promptly stopped. So did the whispering to the microphones. After 3 more days passed, the researchers checked the microphones hourly to make sure they were working. Since they thought it was impossible that no sound would be coming from 5 people inside, the oxygen consumption in the chamber indicated that all 5 must be alive. In fact, it was the amount of oxygen 5 people would have consumed at a very heavy level of strenuous exercise. On one morning of the 14th day, the researchers did say something that they would not be able to do it to get a reaction from the captives. They only used the intercom inside the chamber, hoping to provoke any response from the captives. They were afraid that they were either dead or vegetables. They announced, "We are opening the chamber to test the microphones. Step away from the door and lie flat on the floor or you'll be shot. Compliments will earn one of you in immediate freedom." To their surprise, they heard a single phrase in a calm voice response, "We no longer want to be freed." Debate broke out, and the researchers and military forces funding the research, unable to provoke any more response using the intercom, it was finally decided to open the chamber at midnight on the 15th day. The chamber was flushed off with a stimulant gas filled with fresh air, and immediately voices from the microphones began to object. 3 different voices began begging, as if pleading for the life of their loved ones, to turn the gas back on. The chamber was open and the soldiers were sent in to retrieve the test subjects. They began to scream louder than ever, and so did the soldiers when they saw that was inside. 4 of the 5 subjects were alive, although no one could rightly call the state of any of them in life. The food rations past day 5 and had not been so much as touched, as there were free chunks of meat from the dead test subjects' thighs and chests stuffed to the drain in the center of the chamber, blocking the drain and allowing 4 inches of water to accumulate onto the floor. Precisely of how much the water was on the floor actually was blood, but never determined. All 4 surviving test subjects had a large portions of muscle and skin torn away from their bodies. The destruction of flesh and exposed bone on their fingertips indicated that the wounds were infected by hand. Not with teeth wound as the researchers instantly thought. Closer examination of the position and angles of the wounds indicated that most of it, not all of them, were inflicted. The abnormal organs below the rib cage of all 4 test subjects had been removed, while the heart and lungs and the diaphragm remained in place. The skin and most of the muscles ached, and attached to the ribs had been ripped off, exposing the lungs throughout the rib cage. All blood vessels and organs remained intact. They all just been taken out and laid on the floor, fanning them out to exfoliated, but still the living bodies of the subjects. The digestive tract of all 4 would be seen to be working, digesting food, as it quickly became apparent that they were digesting was their own flesh that they were ripped off and eaten over the course of the few days. Most of the soldiers were Russian special operatives at the facility, but still many refused to return the chamber to remove the test subjects. They continued to scream to be left in the chamber and alternately begged and demanded that the gas should be turned back on, at least till they fall asleep. To everyone's surprise, the test subjects picked up a fierce fight in the process of being removed from the chamber. One of the Russian soldiers had died by having his throat ripped out. Another was greatly injured in having his veins ripped off, and an artery in his leg had been severed by one of the test subject's teeth. Another 5 of the soldiers lost their lives, if you could count the ones committed taking their own lives in the weeks following the incident. In the struggle of the 4 living subjects, had his spleen re-ruptured and bled out almost immediately. The medical researchers attempted to sedate him, but this proved impossible. He was injected with more than 10 times of the human dose of morphine and still fought like a cornered animal, breaking the ribs and arm off of the doctor, when the heart has been seen to beat for a full on 2 minutes, after he had bled out to the point where there was no more air in his vascular system than blood. Even after it stopped, he continued to scream and flail for the next 3 minutes, struggling to get anyone's reach and just repeating the words more, over and over, weaker and weaker, until he finally fell silent. The surviving 3 test subjects were heavily restrained and moved to the medical facility, the 2 within intact vocal cords continuously begging for the gas, demanding to be kept awake. Most of the injured of the 3 were taken to only the surgical operating room that the facility had. In the process, the preparing of the subject would have had its organs placed back in with its body. It was found that he was effectively immune to the sedative, and they have given him to prepare for surgery. He fought furiously against the restraints. When he had anesthetic gas that was brought out and put him under, he managed to tear most of it away within a 4-inch wide leather strap on one wrist. Even though the weight of it was a 200-pound soldier, holding it more than the wrist as well, it took only a little anesthetic than normal to put him under. And under the instant eyelids fluttered and closed, his heart stopped, and the autopsy of the test subject that died on the operating table. It was found that his blood had triple the normal level of oxygen. His muscles were still attached to the skeleton that were badly that he'd broken 9 bones of his struggle to not be subdued. Most of them were at the force of his own muscles, and he exerted to them. The second survivor had been the first of the group of 5 to start screaming. His vocal cords were destroyed and was unable to beg or object to surgery, and only reacted by shaking his head violently in disapproval when the anesthetic gas was brought in near him. He shook his head yes when someone suggested, reluctantly, they tried the surgery without the anesthetic, and did not react for the entire 6-hour procedure of replacing his abdominal organs and attempting to cover him with what remained of his skin. The surgeons presiding stating repeatedly that it should be medically possible for the patient to still be alive. One terrified nurse assisting the surgery stated that she had seen one of the patient's mouth curl into a smile several times whenever his eyes met hers. When the surgery ended for the subject, looked at the surgeon and began to wheeze loudly, attempting to talk while struggling. Assuming that this must be something dramatic or importance of the surgeon, had a pen and pad fetched so the patient could write his messages. It was simple: keep cutting. The 2 last subjects were given the same surgery, born and both without anesthetic as well, although they had to be injected with paralytic during the duration of the operation. The surgeon found it to be impossible to perform the operation while the patients laughed continuously. Once paralyzed subjects could only follow the attending researchers with their eyes. The paralytic cleared their system in an abnormally short period of time, and were soon trying to escape from their bonds. The moment that they could speak, they were again asking for the stimulated gas. The researchers kept trying asking why they had injured themselves, why they had ripped out their own guts, and why they wanted to be given the gas again. Only one response was given: I must remain awake. All 3 of the restraints were reinforced and were placed back into the chamber, waiting for determination as to what should be done with them. The researchers, facing the wrath of their military benefactors for having failed the stated goals of their project, considered euthanizing the surviving subjects. The commanding officer, an ex-KGB, instead saw potential and wanted to see what would happen if they put the gas on. The researchers strongly objected, but they were overruled. In preparation for them being sealed in the chamber again, the subjects were connected to an EEG monitor and had their restraints padded on for a long-term confinement. To everyone's surprise, all 3 stopped struggling, and the movement was let it slip that they were going to be back on the gas. It was obvious that at this point, all 3 were putting up a great struggle to stay awake. One of the subjects could speak, was humming loudly and continuously. The mute subject was restraining his legs against the lever bonds with all of his might. First left, then right, then left again, for something to focus on. The remaining subject was holding his head off of his pillow and blinking rapidly. Having been the first to wire the EEG, most of the researchers were monitoring his brain's wave in surprise. They were normal most of the time, but sometimes flat-lined inexplicably. It looked as if they were repeating suffering brain death before returning to normal. As they focused on the paper strolling out of the brainwave monitor, only one nurse saw his eye slip shut at the same moment as his head hit the pillow. His brain waves immediately changed with that to a deep sleep, then flatlined for the last time as his heart similarly stopped. The only remaining subject that they could speak and start screaming has to be sealed in by now. His brain waves showed the same flatness as ones who would have died from falling asleep. The commander gave the order to seal the other chamber in both subjects inside, as well as the 3 researchers. One of the named 3 immediately drew his gun and shot the commander point blank between the eyes, then turned the gun to the mute subject and blew his brains out as well. He pulled out his gun and remaining subject, while still restrained to the bed, as the remaining members of the medical and research team filled the room. I won't be locked in here with these things. Not with you, he screamed, as the man strapped onto the table. What are you? He demanded. I must know. The subject smiled. Have you forgotten so easily? The subject asked. We are you. We are the madness that lurks within you, all begging to be set free at the very moment of the deepest animal mind. We are what you hide from inside your bed every night. We are what you sedate into the silence and paralyze, says, when you go into the nocturnal heaven where we cannot be tired. The researcher paused and then aimed the subject at the heart and fired. The EEG flattened as the subject weakly choked out. So nearly free. And that, my little pretties, was the Russian sleeping experiment, a creepypasta. My final thoughts on this story. This story actually was one of my favorite creepypastas, like regular creepypastas, I guess ever since I came across this story. Now, this story, I don't think I narrated this back in 2019. Maybe I did, but I probably just don't remember. But this story was honestly really well made. Like, I really thought this story was really well made. This story honestly tells about, some people, deciding to put some test subjects in there to test them out on the sleeping experiment. Now, this is actually a classic, well-made creepypasta, and I definitely have to say, when I first heard of this story, I honestly was very surprised of how well done this story is. Now, this story honestly had a very good, it's very good and well detailed for how well this story is. It's a classic creepypasta, so I can't really, deny any of this. This honestly is a really well made story for what this one really is. I remembered hearing so many narrations from certain people on here. I honestly really thought that this story actually provided pretty good concept for what this story is. I do like the fact that there is a lot of great writing in this story, such as the good grammar, the sentence structuring, storyline. I love the concept. It's a very well made story. And I definitely would have to say this story honestly plays a pretty good part in this story. That I honestly really gotta say I'm really impressed with how well made this classic is. Now, this story, I have to say, it's a good one. And I definitely would have to say it is a classic. I recommend you guys check out this story if you haven't. It's on the regular Creepypasta Wiki. You guys will not be disappointed once you've seen it. So, I would have to say, yeah. I don't know who the author of this story is, so I'm going to leave it as anonymous for now. If the author manages to find this video and manages to comment and let me know that he or she or they or them wrote the story, I'll be sure to give the author proper credit then. Until I find out who the original author is, I'm going to leave this as anonymous for now. Classic good story, and if the author manages to come across this video, I want the author to know that this story was amazing. Not gonna lie, I really enjoyed this story. Well made. Very awesome job with this story. You did pretty good with this story. That's one of the messages I wanted to say to the author if the author manages to come across this video. Anyways, I guess with that being said, yeah, like I'm gonna say, this is just simply my own personal opinion, and if you happen to disagree with me, that's perfectly fine too. We're all entitled to our own opinions in regards to these creepypastas, and this is simply my own personal thoughts. My final rating of this story would have to be a 10 out of 10. Beautiful, well-made story. It's a very well-made classic creepypasta. This is definitely one of the classics that I really like personally. If you guys want to have a read at this story, I recommend you go ahead and have a read at this story. You will not be disappointed once you've seen this. I mean, I enjoyed it. I thought this was neat. It's a good creepypasta. It's definitely worth to read. So, what did you guys think about this creepypasta? What are your thoughts on it? Do you like it? Do you not? Also, what we have done personally to help make this story a lot better. Feel free to leave me your thoughts in the comments below, because I like to hear what your thoughts are on that. And as always, I'm the Queen of Lions. Thank you so much for watching today's episode. And if you're new to the channel, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe, because I make brand new videos every single day. Don't forget to ring the notification bell to when I upload, so that way you guys will not miss an upload. And as always, please roll the outro, because I'm out.